Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins-Treworgy, also known various places online as Byron Residius. Today's presentation, goodly ladies and gentlemen, is going to be a first for me. I've appeared as an occasional panel member on a small handful of shows over the last couple of years, and those of you familiar with my buddy Cortex know that he and I have done a run of presentations on his YouTube channel entitled The Deep Dives with Cortex and Byron Residius, focusing largely on analyzing the analog horror series The Back Rooms by Kane Pixels, various SCP Foundation entries, the Mandala catalogs, and my personal favorite series run that he and I did, which was reviewing and analyzing Amazon Studios' adaptation of Fallout, which we gleefully tore asunder with some mild praise sprinkled here and there throughout, where it was owed. But today, for the first time, I'll be hosting the gentleman that you see on screen with me, a fellow whose tale deserves to be told indeed. Today, we have a collision that will be displayed before you, one wherein fiction, myself, meets with reality based, hence the name of the stream today. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me and yourselves to give a warm welcome to Mr. Ryan Roger Athay. How do you do, sir?
I'm doing very well, my good man. I hope you're doing well. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. Otherwise, it won't be much of a show, as I always like to say. And it's nice to have talks like these again, even in exile. It is on Rumble Studio. I've got to get used to using this particular site. That way, I can be in the Rumble Creator Program, which is a nicer way of saying, join our club here at Rumble, and then we'll actually promote you instead of leaving you in the wilderness. That's why they encourage people to come into the program. Mm.
Yes, indeed. Rather than twitching in the wind, because, that tends to be what happens when a body is left dangling, whether it be physically or digitally. You just kind of flail about like you're in a Obsidian game that has piss poor collision detection. I would cite have you look at any death claw that you fight in the deep ravine there. Um, so I do have a few pre-written questions that I prepared for this presentation, for this chit chat, that I'd love to run through with you as throughout the conversation. Before we get to that, bear in mind you've nothing to fear when I ask this, since my name isn't Andrew Ryan and this isn't the City of Rapture. But would you kindly start us off by explaining why you're here with me on YouTube as well as Rumble, rather than on, say, your own channel? Would you please kindly go ahead and give us an overview of what happened?
How long has it been? How long has it been? Let's have a look. It's been 8 days since I was exiled from YouTube, since my channel got wiped out, ladies and gentlemen, as a result of harassment and cyberbullying. I mean, come on, folks. I'm the one who gets harassed and cyberbullied. Have you ever watched SNH? I mean,
Uh,
seriously.
yes,
Seriously.
of course I watched it. So where I became familiar with you.
It's gotten to a point on that show where there are now no pure whites left on the show. It's so sad. But as a result of just getting deplatformed, just wiped out, the channel just completely annihilated. Of course, I appealed. Of course, they rejected it. My biggest surprise is that it took them 11 hours to reject it instead of
Oh
11
wow, that
seconds.
that
Yeah.
that's fairly lengthy because most folks who tend to be slightly more dissident or willing to say no, fuck you, tend to get nuked from orbit, and then when they do an appeal, there is a bot on the other end just waiting to intercept that appeal and go denied again.
Yeah, but thankfully, I've managed to rebuild anew on Rumble. Gone from about 120 odd followers to over 720 followers now. Hopefully, I can get to 1,000 soon, but it will take time and effort, especially being in exile in the wilderness. But I think I can do it. I mean, Rumble appreciates shows more than videos, but my schedule's barely changed. In fact, personally, it's like a burden has been lifted, Byron. You don't have to be on Will's show 3 days a week. Don't have to be on Hypno's show, pulling an all-nighter every Saturday. Don't have to be on Smash's show after Hypno's show, which was turning into a Saturday thing. So more and more I think to myself, this exile, while it seems bad on the surface, it's actually good when you really penetrate the situation. That way I can take a more relaxed approach. I can build up my own creative endeavors. I can welcome people on that YouTube maybe wouldn't like, and welcome
Well,
on people who are criminally underrated, such as yourself, for example.
well, I appreciate the compliments there. You mentioned yesterday the same sort of notion when you were on your Rumble stream that effectively there is a certain amount of pressure that has been taken off of you because you're no longer under YouTube slash Google slash Alphabet's panopticon or the Eye of Sauron. You don't have that fiery, flaming eye of Neil Mohan, which is probably flaming because it's infected from poo dung because he's an Indian. But you get to avoid that screen staring back at you and saying, "You've been a naughty boy, and we're now going to wield the banhammer that Susan Wiki Wiki left behind on top of her coffin before they lowered her to be, relegated to the realms of hell."
Hmm.
But um, aside from that, and from sort of missing out on being a part of many of those channels or their presentations, have there been any? I guess I want to ask: has it seemed as though there has been greater appreciation for your presence on Rumble as opposed to YouTube?
Oh, I've certainly been rewarded switching over from one platform to another. I mean, my debut show got nearly 20,000 views. I got put on the front page of Rumble for a few hours. It's not
Good
watched
God!
over too, as well as my deplatforming video. But I fill a niche in Rumble's system, which they are desperate for, which is entertainment, pop culture content creation. And for me personally, my setup hasn't changed. How I arrange things haven't changed. I don't have to worry about YouTube anymore. I don't have to worry about my own colleagues climbing the greasy pole anymore because they do. They do. A lot of very ambitious people throughout
And to be,
content
and to be
creation.
right, and to be fair, and just for the sake of full transparency, technically speaking, I would kind of qualify as one of those pole climbers myself by having you on here. I stand to benefit a great deal more having you on this program than you would benefit from being on the show of a literal who. So I appreciate you taking the time and agreeing to do this program with me.
Well, that's what I do on reality based. We just take people, we platform them, and then we showcase them. It's literally, it boils down to that, and I think I'm doing a relatively good job. So much so that almost every position I'm now gone from has been filled by a member of reality based. So the deplatforming itself didn't even work from a practical
Oh,
standpoint. Look at Will's show, for example. Will of the Fans. He does 3 shows a week: Tuesday, Thursday, and then a Doctor Who show on Sunday when it's on. In every single show, there is a reality based member there. Never used to be that way. It just used to be me and Will, and then I brought in John because I saw a lot of potential in the problematic white guy.
I like
And
Johnny.
then slowly say Mr. Nobody, then Discuss Thing, and a few other occasional guests. And now that I've been exiled, we just let the reality based members join Will's group, and he has his own power base. And in regards to, say, SNH, Saturday Night Hypnosis, I think my absence speaks volumes, not just about my deplatforming, but where the show is going into the future. Because I debuted on SNH on episode 30. Now, I was the second generation of regular. So I was supposed to be the fresh blood, along with Atreus, along with Cassie. along with a few others as well, because Hypno had done some shuffling about with the first generation of regulars. Will went on a hiatus.
And
Coach and Dragon.
that was back
Hmm?
when Hypnotic was still just a still image, right? I mean, that was back when it was a
Years ago.
PNG tuber, as John likes to joke. And I have to say, I appreciate that he's still continuing, even with a VTuber model, to present himself as a bad kind of almost Tumblr artist version of a bad original character presentation of yet one another personality of Mark Spector, known as Moon Knight. But you do what you do. I mean, that's what Puerto Ricans are good for, ripping things off. Anyway, moving
Oh
along.
my! I'm
I
gonna have
didn't
to
want
use
you to
that
feel
one.
I didn't want you to feel completely out of your element. There has to be somebody who's willing to say something offensive, even though I genuinely don't mean that. But
Hmm.
you gotta throw the barbs where you have an opportunity. But
Sure.
talking about this networking does offer me a good natural segue into one of the questions that I've got jotted down. You strike me as having proven to be quite the talent scout for content creators and streamers, given your track record and the what we've seen sprout out of your identifying people who you think or seem to strike me as thinking there's something there and that should be highlighted and shown to other people. What usually makes someone stand out to you in the online content creation arena?
Consistency. That is the number one thing. That is the bedrock. That is the foundation. Not talent. Everyone thinks it's talent, not talent. You can be as talented as the moon is in the sky. You could be as high up in the sky as the moon in terms of talent. If you don't have the consistency, you're not going anywhere. Think of it in terms of comparing myself with, say, Atreus, for example. Atreus has the talent, he has the charisma, certainly has the ego, but he doesn't really have the consistency. And he also humiliates himself. Don't put him near a wine bottle, and don't make him play Dustborn because he'll have to dress up in clown makeup. Now,
It
when
could
I
be
look at
worse with the wine bottle. He could pull a Ricada and shove it up his own ass.
oh
Um,
my
so
goodness, but I wouldn't be surprised with Atreus. To me, Atreus is a great example of all talent and less consistency. Whereas with me, it's all consistency and no talent. All I do is find people. It's what I try to do. So for me, to answer that question, yes, consistency is the foundation. Then from there, do they resonate with people or not? And how long did it take for them to resonate with people or not? Are they a creator that's very tall or very wide? Now, tall creators have a lot of support, but not much of a community. Wide creators are creators with not a lot of support, but a strong community. And
hmm,
ideally, you want a creator who has a lot of support and a big community, but it's hard to get in touch with those sorts of people. So it's
right.
about finding out people's potential. And a great thing about being in exile is that I can step away, start afresh, and have a different outlook on things. The creators I like the most are the criminally underrated ones. That is where the potential lies. And a great thing about being on shows and talking to people who don't have much of a viewership is that you have a lot more freedom to speak your mind. A lot
That's
of
fair.
people vastly underestimate the fact that the more prominent a show becomes on average, the less likely the people on the show A want to be there, and B are free to speak their minds. You see that a lot, especially when you get to the highest levels. It
Right.
becomes more of an alliance of convenience than anything else.
Well, I think a lot of that stems from the fact that many of these presentations, particularly in the sort of semi-social media space that YouTube and Rumble kind of operate based off of, their basic predicate is that this is social media in a live video or recorded video format. You can build as tall as you'd like, but unless you cement the scaffolding underneath you, all it takes is one swing of a sledgehammer in the wrong place, and the whole thing comes tumbling down like a pile of shit.
That's why I'm not a fan of shorts video making, because I divide content creation into three. You've got, of course, content creation, video making. Then you've got live streaming. Then you've got shorts video making. And shorts channels are the greatest example of a channel with all support and no community. They're tall channels. With live streamers, it's all community and no support. So they're very wide channels. And with the standard video making channels, it's a bit of both because that's where it
Right.
started on YouTube. I've always aimed to be underrated myself, largely so I could speak my mind. But then I got deplatformed for being myself. I had YouTube creators on X recently saying, being yourself is the way to go on your creator journey. My response was, I was being myself and you deplatformed me. Follow me on Rumble. And I
it's a
put my
good
Rumble.
it's a good response to throw in their faces like, hey, you say you want authenticity and sincerity. Well, I was authentic and you sincerely threw my arse right out the door. So
It
can
was
you
very
explain
interesting. It was
explain
very
it again?
interesting, mainly because of the fact that the British authorities not really fans of freedom of speech and freedom of thought or freedom of expression. Yet it was an American content creation website that wiped out my creative journey before the British government.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating that you didn't have a Bobby just knocking at your door going, hey, we need to have a few words with you about something you
This,
happen to say online.
not many people know this. Which is why I always tell it all the time. The people who get black bagged in Britain for speech violations and hate speech, that sort of thing, they all have one thing in common. They have a majority British audience. I don't. In fact, I never have.
That's fair because they're more worried about you having those folks having an influence on the people who they actually govern.
And
Whereas if you're
I was told this straight. As long as you don't have a majority British audience, you will be fine. Which is why most of my content appeals to Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, basically English speaking people that aren't in the UK. And
right,
that's why
myself
when they
included.
found out, because of course they did, when they found out I got deplatformed, they laughed. They found it funny, but it's like, don't worry, just continue your journey on Rumble. The same rules apply as long as you have, um, or don't have rather, a majority British audience. You feel free to speak your mind.
Right, because as I was kind of leaning towards implying, if your if your fan base is not predominantly British, they don't have to worry about what you're saying impacting the people who live in the society and nation under which they are currently governing. So they don't have to worry about being people getting upsy and deciding to poke questions that they don't want to have to answer. Things about like I don't know, grooming gangs. They don't want to have to address that question. Just ask Tommy Robinson. Well, I would say ask him, but you'd have to do it through a glass with holes
Well,
drilled in it.
he's out of prison now.
Oh, he is out.
He looks like a dwarf with his big hair and his big beard. No razors, obviously, because he would have been stabbed up in prison if he was anywhere near a razor. But yes, he is out now. He is going to plan some organizational things, some protests and what have you. But it's the same revolving door. They'll tolerate it to an extent, and they'll throw him back in there.
More than likely, yes, because the process is the punishment oftentimes in situations like that. I'm always curious when he's going to finally make the observation or joke that, hey, look, all I'm trying to say is that these blokes who are going around doing this awful, underhanded, terrible shite to working class girls, really, it's almost admirable that they do what they do because they're epitomizing their faith to Muhammad by being pederasts. But anyway,
There's
um,
a twisted kind of principle in it, and that's
yes,
the And there's also another kind of twisted principle in having the same ideology for 1400 years and not budging. I only wish we had that sensibility in the West. Um, but looking at it more and more, when I think about it in my part of the world, the reason I've found that we have open borders, whereas in the UK, the EU, the US, is because it seems to be the only solution to a problem, Byron, that no one seems to have an answer to. And the answer seems easy on the surface, but deep down it's very difficult. That's why we can't fix the problem. And that's the population problem. Open
Oh,
borders, mass immigration, bringing in people who, in all honesty, breed more is the way to solve the population problem. The problem for the opposition, though, is, Byron, when these fuckers come here and live our ways, guess what they stop doing after a few generations? They stop having kids. So
yep.
there's something about not just Western culture, but civilized culture, which stops procreation. And I think it's because of the unsustainable way that we live. But that's why the borders stay open, Byron. They got to bring more of them in. Otherwise, they can't solve the population problem. It's not out of any hatred or animosity of the native population. It's simply a solution to the ultimate problem, in my view, which is the population problem.
Hmm. Um, that's an area that I am not as well read as I would prefer to be before I extend
Oh,
any comment
very,
on it.
very few people are, because it's such a big problem that there's no one way to solve it, and it's also not a pressing issue. It'll only be a pressing issue when deaths outnumber births, and then people will start panicking.
Right. And when you have systems that rely upon or depend upon having a larger generation coming up and growing up to take care of and tend to the elder generation that's living longer and longer, that require essential care services, but you don't have enough people of a youthful and capable, able bodied disposition to be able to take care of them as well as their own young, and you end up reversing the roles of who your society is supposed to be tending to or caring for maximally, which is we are supposed to be predicated on in the West on the notion of caring for our young and our children primarily. But you look at places that have an immense population drop or decline problem like they have in South Korea and Japan, where the largest cohort of people in the nation are elderly, and you have fewer and fewer people able to take care of them as well as tend to their own needs and their own families. Many of them suspect they can't afford to have their own children. There aren't enough resources to tend to their own children, so they don't have the children. This is where you get people who are absolutely anti-natalist and anti-life, like folks on the excessively fringe progressive left, people who are so far off the bacchanal that they've decided they're going to throw themselves over into the abyss. People like Alyssa Mercante, who had herself scraped a couple of times. And I'm not certain if that's necessarily a terrible thing. Could you see her being a mother? I imagine that it would be a crime against humanity and nature itself to give her responsibility over anything other than her own desires. But we'll touch upon that harlot in a little bit here. Um, Sorry about that, Spurg.
That's all right. It fills time and it gives me material. Because you bet your ass, folks, I'm turning this into videos.
Well, that's not a problem. Hey, brief sidebar. If you're going to do a video, go ahead and throw in the reference that I love that you've done the whole buy my book, the reference to the critic, Jay Sherman, voiced by John Lovitz. I don't remember,
Well,
when was
other
that
people,
show?
other people reference it to a certain creator who cosplayed as a woman and as a
Yeah,
furry
yeah.
to sell their smut. A
But
guy
here,
who's so desperate to also become a martyr like me that he's like, "Come on, you can be on my show. We can be friends again. I won't throw you under the bus." And I'm like, "Dude, I can see through the fucking sword you have behind your back. You're that transparent." But
Not just that, but he's probably got a couple of like paid, commissioned greyhounds waiting for you to be thrown under. But I wanted to go ahead and just do my own. Buy my book. Buy my book. Anyway, sorry. I have to do that because it's part of the gag, and I've been doing that bit, referencing The Critic, which was an amazing, too short-lived animated program from Fox back in the day. That's where the reference stems from. I imagine you were paying homage to that. I was doing that reference back on Blog TV when I was first actually trying to do the whole live streaming thing. Yeah, I'm 43 years old, Ryan.
I'm
I've been doing.
25.
Yeah, I know. I've been doing this shit too long. Um, but yeah, and JDA is not. It wasn't a planned conversation for me to have with you at any juncture here. But if you want to
Don't
touch on that,
reference the ghoul. It'll appear.
that's
I'm sure
fair
he's
point.
got his name on speed dial on the internet. I'm
Where's
sure.
there's no mirrors in here, so I can't conjure Candyman. But Tony Todd is a motherfucker, and he'll show up anywhere you go to. Um, Rest in peace, Tony Todd. Anyhow, sorry if I'm a little bit all over the place and scattershot too, but I like to try and be a little bit loose in these things because much as I appreciate that Stephen King is a complete fucking half-wit, many of his characters that he's written over the years have imparted some tremendous wisdom. One of them being Roland Deschain of Gilead in the Dark Tower series, when he said, "The best laid plans have plenty of room to adjust." And he was telling that to Eddie Dean in Wolves of the Calla, which ironically is the book in which Eddie Dean caught a bullet that ended his path. I hope that wasn't a spoiler.
No, I'm 25. I barely know anything about pop culture.
The Dark Tower isn't necessarily what I would call pop culture, except for the fact that it did end up getting adapted by Marvel into a comic book series. But tremendous books. As much of a twat as King is, I cannot recommend highly enough reading the Dark Tower series as a form of epic fantasy. It really is tremendous stuff.
You gotta
Um,
understand, Byron. I come from a generation of people who don't read books. They probably
I
can't spell book either.
I'm I'm painfully aware. Um, the written word is it's my joy. It's the primary methodology in which I create anything. Um, as I've indicated, and as people who have seen me on here before very well know, I mean, I do more Substack material than I do YouTube or Rumble, and writing is genre fiction is my avenue to being a human being. But
I mean,
that's a
I wrote
side.
an article, of course, during my deplatforming. I wrote an article on Smash JT's website, and all I did was I took my script for YouTube deplatformed me. Here's why, and I used that as the article because I'm gonna say it on video. I'm going to say it in an article, so much so that I even made references to the fact that I'm reading this to you, despite the fact that it's an article. But there we go in that regard. So, what I would do if I wrote a lot of Substack articles is that they would be great as scripts for videos, personally.
Hold on a second here. If you don't mind, I'm gonna roll into another one of the preset questions that I've got set up for you here. There are several forms of entertainment that fall under the banner of pop culture, including television, films, comic books, music, and these days especially, video games. What makes this last the amazing wonder of video games, which I'm a longtime fan of and hobbyist and enthusiast for. But what made that a particular area or arena of interest or in focus for you?
Oh, for me personally, it was entertaining, and for the most part, cost effective. I've always favored more cost effective solutions to things because I know the majority of people on this planet are poor, folks. Not wealthy, and they're certainly not American, I can tell you that. I know that there's an economic reason why all the rice munchers and spear chuckers and curry munchers want to come to the Western world because it is the most peaceful, most prosperous part of the world. And if the door's open, you're going to go in, folks, especially if you want to be wealthier and live in a more peaceful setting. I mean, for me personally, I've been gaming since I was a child. I first started gaming on the PS1. The first console I had was a Nintendo GameCube of my own. It's also the last Nintendo console I ever bought. Why? Because Nintendo stopped being a traditional console company after the GameCube. So for me, one of the main reasons why the pop culture war has gone into gaming is because as an institution, gaming was a lot less infected by the zeitgeist than other forms of media, which is why what we're seeing in gaming today is as bad as it is, because the infection is much more recent. And there are a lot of problems in gaming that have nothing to do with the agenda. The monetization of games, for example, the DLCs, the microtransactions, free to play gaming, which I can't stand personally.
It's never
Those
free. Always
aspects,
price tag.
exactly. But those issues combined with agenda laced projects is causing the industry in the West, at least, to undergo a reckoning. And that will spread as the agenda disease spreads to the East and to other parts of the world. But that is why we have a culture war, because you've got two sides, mainly, for the most part, who want to dominate the existing zeitgeist. One that wants to infect everything it touches, and the other that just wants to make entertainment great again.
Right. Because a lot of the agenda pushing, it's like a cancer. It gets in there and it just slowly spreads and infects the healthy cells. And unless you are willing to go in there with a scalpel and the necessary chemicals to remove it, you're really not going to put an end to it.
I
It's going to
agree.
continue to get worse and worse. There are some ways in which, in recent years, well, not recent years, I'd say in about the last year and a half, there have been a couple of small victories and pushbacks to say, no, knock it off. We see what you're doing. And I personally think that the folks who are pushing the fringe left agendas that we see kind of infesting much of gaming, they picked the wrong target audience to go after, because I remember playing Mega Man back in the day and all kinds of other games that were reliant upon pattern recognition. This is a biological evolutionary imperative of all surviving Homo sapiens. We have survived as long as we have primarily because we recognize patterns. And when a pattern repeats itself over and over again, we learn to adapt to it, to defend against it, and to preserve ourselves from it and from its insidiousness. When you accelerate that pattern repetition in the form of digital media, the folks who indulge in that form of entertainment for a long time or even a short time, but with great devotion, they are quick to pick up on, hey, fuck nuts. I see what you're doing. Knock it the hell off. Now, with some of the pushback that has been managed against that agenda pushing set, unfortunately, that created a small bit of a breathing room gap. And I used this on my show the other day. Roughly speaking, there's about, I'd say, 7% of the gaming audience that are fringe left, weird, blue haired weirdos like Mercante and company. And then over here, you've got about 23%, I'd say, roughly, of folks who are fringe to the right. The rest of us are in this middle ground. So why aren't game companies trying to sell us this? Why aren't they aiming at this group of people? Because it seems like a lot of them are trying to aim over here at that 7%, which is a fraction of the potential audience. You're not going to make a profitable game, i.e., look to Concord, look to Dustborn, look to the Star Wars game that what was it?
Outlaws.
Outlaws. Outlaws. All right. You're spending all your time focusing on this small clutch of people who I've got news for you. And this was something that was put forth by Nielsen Bookscan back in 2022. This is regarding a different media, regarding books, not video games, but when extrapolated to other forms of media, it has been proven to be relevant. Do you know what group of people are most responsible for piracy of digital products? White college educated women. They make
So
up 61% of all piracy of digital entertainment is committed by white college educated women. The same group of shrieking harpies who are telling us what we can and cannot have fun with. And, oh, of course, we'll promote your product on Twitter, on X, and on Instagram, and on WhatsApp, and blah, 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 blah. But they don't actually fucking pay for anything.
of course not, because they're woke white women, as problematic John likes to highlight. Well, what I find very interesting is that the agenda pushing we see in entertainment as a whole, it's institutional. It's not outside in, it's now inside out. It was outside in back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s and 90s. Um, I think from the 2010s onwards, it was institutional, and we started to see it overtly because it succeeded covertly. So if something can succeed without you knowing about it, of course they're going to enter the arena and see if they can
Right,
succeed. And my worry is, Byron, is that those who want to reform the existing institutions of pop culture and entertainment are going to fall victim to a compromised victory. They'll come to an understanding with the opposition. They'll get rid of the overt wokeness, for lack of a better term, and they'll paint what they've done as a victory, and then for the next few decades we get all these great projects that push a subtle agenda, because we got a lot of great projects in the
right. It'll be
past.
quiet. It'll be quieter. And you were touching upon this yesterday on your show, and it put me in mind of something that you're familiar with Kirshi, the VTuber,
Yeah.
yes? And she has pointed out several times over the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 months that Jack Posobiec has been making the rounds, waving a pennant of victory, claiming, oh, DEI is dying, it's falling. And then she's in the background going, motherfucker, they just renamed it. They called it Bridge. It's still there. They're just operating under quiet terms. They're still having these seminars and these conferences. They're still talking about making it part of the, quote, corporate DNA, so that everyone from the CEO to the CFO to the COO down to the fucking janitor who's sweeping out and mopping the floors in the building is going, yes, we will do the work, because they're absolute fucking drones at this point.
They'll have to hire more janitors, especially if Indians take the top jobs. But I will point out that
Now,
I
Mr.
think one of
Ande,
the
I
main
remember that remark, and I would ask you to apologize right now. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I will point out, though, that there is a reason that we underwent more social change in 70 years in the West than we did during the previous 700 years. It's because of subtle agenda pushing in our popular culture from the end of the Second World War until the financial crash of 2008. And we didn't really start seeing any pushback to that agenda pushing until it became really overt and damaging. And the first instances of that was during the original Gamergate of 2014. So when you've
Right.
got nearly 70 years of agenda pushing, radically transforming society, my worry is we'll have a compromised victory. The institutions will be reformed And we will go back to that status quo of covert agenda pushing, which will radically transform our society as we enter the 22nd century, where the demons, the tranny demons, become normalized. They're not monsters, they're gender dysphoric victims as whole generations of people become trans through pushing a covert wokeness. And I think there are those within our ranks who are willing to entertain this compromised victory. And as a good bonus, they make names for themselves. They climb the greasy pole. They go to the suit and tie parties. They become celebrities. They go to award shows. And I can see through fuckers like that. And it's like, you don't have the best interests of the people in your mind. You fight for yourself and only for yourself. You're a lone wolf, an agent of chaos, and you want to have this compromised victory so you can boost your reputation.
I can definitely see where that would be. I can see where that would be the conclusion, and I see some of it as not as much of it as you do, not as clearly as you do. Largely, I think because I'm not as thoroughly invested in the sort of mid-tier celebrity status chase as some folks are. I'm
I
just a
see it
guy
among
who
my own colleagues, Byron.
uh,
That's why I see it even among my own colleagues. That's why another advantage of being an exile, Byron. You didn't have to kick me out. And that would have caused a whole fucking can of worms. So, from my perspective, Byron, getting exiled was a win win for everyone involved. It was a win for the opposition because they don't want someone like me penetrating the zeitgeist. The damage I could do would be insane. Some of my own colleagues could benefit from me being exiled so they don't have to deal with a more radical perspective. They don't have
right,
to
and
directly call me out because if they did, well, then what stops me from telling everyone everything about them?
well, I don't think it was fair to. I don't think it's fair to just shunt you aside, particularly when you have been very helpful or attempted to be helpful in promoting these very same said people. I understand their self preservation instinct, but I don't necessarily care a great deal for it. I could be engaging in being just a sentimental sap. I'm not certain. And it probably stems from I don't talk much about it. I don't bloviate or go on or blow smoke up my own arse. I am a person of faith. I'll just plant it that way vaguely. Those who have been loyal to you and have given you aid and succor when you needed it, there is a debt. And in order to stay in good standing, ethically, spiritually, I am personally of the belief that you need to be able and willing to pay back what you owe in terms of that loyalty. Now, I'm a bit of a dunce. I'm fair willing to admit that. To do the Alex Jones thing, let me tell you something, Joe. I'm a little retarded, but I don't understand why. I get okay. I understand why they some of these folks would want to put distance between themselves and you, but again, I come back to why.
Because I'm too dangerous. It's as simple as that. I think Speargate proved this. Don't know if you were around during those days, Byron.
Yes,
But
I
one
was just a quiet viewer, a member of the Bigot Army. At the time, I was calling myself Staff Sergeant Byron Osidius of the Bigot Army, Western Forces, reporting for duty. I've upgraded myself, given myself an infield promotion to Master Sergeant Byron Osidius, NCOIC of Western Forces, which, for those unfamiliar, stands for Non-Commissioned Officer in Charge of. Um, yeah, I just
it's just
throw some
it
military
was it
slang in.
was it was Speargate, which was oof, about October of 2024. I was celebrating my third anniversary of my second run as a content creator. All it took was one single statement to cause a controversy.
Yeah, I
Should have
was there
called
for that.
Spear Chucker Studios. It would have lasted longer. Still stand by that.
Well, I'm
Truthful
sorry.
statement.
How can you be offended by that when the character in your game on screen throws a spear as a skill? That is
Chuck,
their move set. Hmm?
Chuck's a spear, but I do understand where you're coming from. But what's interesting about that controversy, Byron, is that for the first 3 days, we were laughing and joking. Everyone involved was laughing and joking about it, having a great time. And then, as soon as I made a statement, standing by what I said, that's when it kicked off. It was a week long controversy. All sorts of people were getting condemned. It was episode 113. There are two different versions. The first version you can still find on Rumble. You won't find it on YouTube, I'll tell you that. But it caused a zeitgeist shift. It caused the more reformist minded creators, Byron, to go from welcoming me with open arms to distancing themselves from me, but they didn't say it openly because it would have caused a controversy. I can say it openly now because I'm exiled. I've got nothing to lose by stating this to you and stating this to everyone. There is a quiet covert element within our ranks, dare I call them a cabal, that want to climb the greasy pole, reform popular culture to make it great again, and ultimately succumb themselves to a compromised victory, in which in return they will benefit from. No more, no less. So yeah, there are more than two sides in the culture war. And don't get me started on the fucking supposed radicals who practice Christian values on one hand, but on the other become fucking furries.
Yes, that's actually.
They're as big of a problem as well.
I I got
Inconsistent
I got
motherfuckers.
almost sidetracked when I did get sidetracked when I was bringing this up before.
All right.
Something that I mentioned in one of my previous streams was that when we did finally get a little bit of pushback against the progressive, uber progressive, left, liberal, fringe, weirdo, woke, libtard, bullshittery agenda, shoving its conch into games. We finally had a little bit of pushback and got some breathing room. Enter in John Delaraz and the people at Fandom Pulse and Melanie Mack and Razor Fist to do once again what we expect to have seen from people who are resurrecting the ghosts of the Reaganite Bush era moral majority, Bible thumping, browbeating, holy rollers better than thou all to try and insist that, oh, great, we have collectively managed to push out the woke ideology. Now bow to our ideology. Get fucked. The whole purpose of us pushing back was to say, we don't want your horseshit agenda crammed down our throat like the blue dildo that John De La Rose shoves up his ass when he thinks about Lucario too hard.
Oh
Oopsie,
my.
Pokemon, a new wild Lucario fucker appeared. Get that shit out. Look, I may ascribe to many of the tenets of Christianity, but I don't want to see it used as a cudgel to beat other people over the head with. It is not supposed to be used that way. Christ said it is better to pray in a closet by yourself than to wield your faith as a blade against your fellow man. Ephesians. If he knew anything about his actual scripture, he would remember that and not be a holier than thou, browbeating cocksucker.
Well, speaking of cocksuckers, I heard that Razor Fist ended Smash JT's career a month
Oh
later.
yeah. Oh,
Smash
weren't you
JT
aware?
still around.
Weren't you aware? Smash only exists because his career only exists because Razor Fist allows it to. I'm sorry. The guy's more delusional than the primary protagonist from the game Postal, who he dresses himself up like. I wonder how many voices are screaming in his ears, telling him to go down to the local elementary school with a loaded shotgun. Because I swear
Uh,
to God, he gets too much more pushback the way that he's been getting it over the last few months, and that's going to wind up being what happens with this son of a bitch. Where did he decide that he was going to throw aside his edgy boy routine and persona in exchange for putting some kind of priestly stole over himself instead of a trench coat?
well,
I'm sorry, dude.
it
The two don't
goes,
mix.
well, it goes back months. It goes back to when it. To try and remember now, I don't have the records in terms of videos because got deplatformed. Remember. However,
Yeah,
it all stems from when Razorfist was a regular of the side scrollers. You guys know the side scrollers. Stuttering
yeah.
Craig as the centerpiece and Blabs as the lady who makes it all happen. Happy 29th birthday to Blabs, by the way, as of the making of this live stream. It was her birthday recently.
Ah,
Razorfist was a regular of side scrollers, and Smash was an occasional guest. Then Smash decided to give his thoughts regarding the fall of Razorfist, just reacting to some coverage from Kino Casino, Warski, and Triple P. One will
ring
eat
it
you,
up.
and the other one will turn you into cocaine. I know quite a bit about blood sports. No one
Ring the
involved in
bell.
it. Yeah, no one involved with it has their hands clean. I'll just make that point clear. But by Smash covering that situation, calling it the fall of Razorfist, he undermined the guy and put the side scrollers in a difficult position. And, I've never directly interacted with Stuttering Craig, but from what I've seen of him and his creator journey, you don't last decades doing what we do unless you cover every angle. That's why you haven't seen Razorfist on side scrollers. That's why I haven't seen Smash on there since. They took a neutral approach, and Razorfist holds a grudge against Smash for it ever since. Because of Smash's Fall of Razorfist video, Razorfist lost a contact, like the side scrollers.
Right. And I imagine too there's some additional kind of loop in there because as a result of Smash covering people like JDA, whose publisher for his comic books is that Vox Day fellow, who's also representing as the publisher for Razor Fist's graphic novel attempts. So there is
Most
a kind of
yeah, yeah, most people aren't aware of these connections, and that's
right.
why
It's a Gordian knot,
people.
but guess what? That's publishing. That's my arena. And this Vox Day guy, I'm sorry, but you're going to call yourself the Latin term for the voice of God? Wow, real Christian of you, heaping all kinds of glory upon yourself. Very humble.
I
These guys,
remember being, oh, yeah, I remember being aware of Vox Day a long time ago, back when he was doing talks with Stefan Molyneux. So, yeah, I know plenty about that guy. I can tell you. Mm.
it's discouraging to me to see he gets such traction on Substack, which is a platform that I've been on for close to 4 years now. I really still enjoy it, even though they've got a lot of fuckery going on there too. Their partnership with Stripe and their refusal to use any other payments processor. I got hit with a know your customer shit with Stripe about back in March. They just sent me another reminder. Hey, you haven't done your KYC checkup. Well, I'm not going to. Go fuck yourselves. The people who subscribe to me, if they want to pay anything, they can, but nothing is behind a paywall. They don't have to. So get fucked. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's perfectly fine.
Looping in here, speaking of the Gordian knots and exposing these people for their various connections and talking about agendas, journalists have been exposed over the course of about the last 10 to 15 years as broadly ideological tool bags with little genuine curiosity or ethics. And this seems especially pronounced in journos who cover the video games industry, particularly going back to, you mentioned Gamergate in the original incarnation in 2014 when Adam Baldwin, not related to the other Baldwin brothers, kicked open a can of worms with the whole Gamergate thing. To what do you suspect this might be tied or owed? Why are so many of these games journos being exposed repeatedly now for being such ideological tool bags?
That's because the institution was infested. And this goes back a heck of a long way than most folks like to admit. Most of my colleagues would love for the world to return to a 1990s style mindset, but that was a time when, the opposition were really manifesting themselves, and scarily in a sustainable fashion. But it's simple. When it comes to not just video games journalism, but all forms of journalism, it was one of the first institutions, along with education, to be infested by the opposition. Firstly, as agents of the USSR, and then when that
Right.
died, their own bloody agents, because, the puppet had to make its own strings after the fact. So they got exposed because they got too careless, they got too overt rather than staying covert. And my worry is once this latest batch and generation of journo rats goes the way of the dinosaur, the institution's still in place. A new generation will learn from the previous generation and push the agenda in a more professional, more covert way, which is far more difficult to bring down.
Right. You had. I'm reminded of Yuri Bezmenov's warning that he issued to people about integrating these people into the various systems by which we operate our society. And you see it in education, you see it in popular culture, you see it instantiated at every step of the process. They get into the institutions, and then they create then the foundation for how those institutions instruct the next batch of people who will be brought into that institution as instructors. You look at the colleges of education, they are from the top down, they are Leninists, they are Marxists. Their program is all about constant criticism, and this is something that a lot of people ascribe to Marx, but it actually came before him. It came from Foucault, it came from Delattre, it came from the that school of thought, the Frankfurt School of Thought, where you constantly criticize and you never let up. It's why you saw Mao's Red Guard get swiftly replaced after they were done being useful. They got themselves excised and exiled, and the most puritanical ones even said, "Yes, I deserve this because I am no longer useful to the movement and the revolution." What kind of dense, brainwashed idiot are you? You're okay with being sent off to the tundra to die? Where's your
Well,
self preservation instinct?
from a digital perspective, I am personally glad that I was exiled because you always have to see the positive and the negative of everything. Yes, you're exiled into the frozen wastes, but hey, you have more creative freedom, haha, to live your own life, which is true
Aha.
even which is true even to this day in the People's Republic of China. You get exiled to the western regions, assuming you're not a Muslim. You can go to Tibet. You can go to the Xinjiang province. You can go to, right on the border with Kashmir if you want to live dangerously. So there is an example of seeing the positive and seeing the negative. For me personally, we are dealing with cogs in a machine. My colleagues want to get rid of the cogs. I want to get rid of the fucking machine. If
Right,
institutions are rotten to the core, then they have to be burnt down.
right, which is, I would say, a term that could be utilized would be an accelerationist, is what I think some folks might dub you. Um, I don't know as that would necessarily be a completely fair assessment, but it's what I have thought when I've heard you say things like you said yesterday. These things don't need to just be reformed, they need to be burned to the ground. The question that comes in for me is, well, then what's next? What do
What's
you put
next?
in place?
Yeah, what's next is the difficult thing. It's rebuilding. Just like the easy part is knocking down a house, right, Byron?
It
Hard
always
part
is.
is yeah.
That's why things like irony, as
Mhm.
David Foster Wallace put it quite possibly best. Irony is a great tool for analysis, criticism, and figuring out what doesn't work. The problem with ironies, especially as used by postmodernists, is that they think the use of irony and wielding that hatchet against the foundation of fiction, the foundation of any kind of form of art, is that it doesn't offer anything in replacement. It offers you a solution to the problem, but it never offers you what's next. No postmodernist that I'm familiar with has ever offered a solution after you get rid of the thing that was the problem to begin with. Rebuilding, yes, is going to take a great deal of effort. It's going to suck. It's going to be painful. But someone has to be willing to stand in the gap and say, you know what? I'm going to take a hit. I'm not going to be profitable. I'm not going to see glory heaped upon my head, but I'm willing to be one of the first people to offer something in place of what we're going to get rid of. Because the first few people who are going to lay that foundation, guess what? They're going to end up part of the foundation. They're going to be buried in the wall, building up that new structure. And the folks who come after them are the ones who are going to be able to make any kind of living off of it. Someone has to be willing to say, I'll become part of the wall. I've offered, yeah, you know what? That's self congratulatory. I'm not going to go down that road.
Well, I
So,
will go down the road of making it quite clear. 20th century has had its time to shine. Let it fucking end. Because it seems we're still stuck in it, just with 21st century technology. People obsess over forms of entertainment that had its time to shine. Everything has its time to shine. Let it fade away. Let new, fresh, vibrant forms of media and entertainment lead the way. And we're seeing this now with the technology democratizing creativity to the masses, to everyone. You see this with Suno for music. You see it with VO for video. You see it with all these damn programs that do all sorts of crazy things. You know, a kangaroo holding passport documents. That's quirky and funny. All of that came from a prompt. What I see is because of the technology we have now, not in the future, right here, right now, we, the people, have the means to make our own entertainment that isn't financially based, doesn't even have to be reality based. It can be fantasy based, but it's the people's. It cannot be monetized, and that's why it's stopped. That's why people want to reform existing institutions because they're still stuck in the mindset of we peaked in the 1990s. We can't get any better than this. And I think that comes from people who lack what could be in the future. And in terms of pop culture and entertainment, we the people can be pop culture and entertainment, not these damn institutions. Let these institutions rot. Let them bleed out. And let we the people fill in the void with our own creative endeavors. Whether they make money or not, Byron, we're getting to a point now in the world where, thanks to technology, that's the one thing about these tech wizards. They don't give a damn about money, despite the fact that they constantly need it. It's means and ends, that sort of thing. We're entering a period where the technology that's being developed will end the financially based world we know, which puts us in a very difficult position. And to
right,
me,
it becomes a quandary.
I think we should put the best foot forward and let the people create their own entertainment.
I do not disagree with you in that regard. It's part of the reason why, and it has been brought to my attention by longtime friends that I tend to shoot myself in the foot. I did the whole ha showing off book here. There are 3 different stories in this book that I have shared on stream as live read alouds. And I've had a couple of friends of mine say, "You realize you're shooting yourself in the foot by doing that?"
Mhm.
And I kind of raise an eyebrow and say, "Well, what do you mean?" And the response every time is, "Well, how are you going to sell that book to people if you're offering the stories free of charge?" To which my response has broadly been, God did not tell me to make a profit off of telling stories. He just told me to tell stories. I don't necessarily need to make money off of what I'm doing to tell a story. I just enjoy telling stories, whether they be horror or they be dark fantasy, or, and yes, I set this up ahead of time so I could be, a little self-congratulatory, whether it be straight up fantasy, you know? A lot of these books that I have written over the years have been presented on my Substack as free to read, chapter by chapter posts. I've removed a lot of chapters just because I had some kerfuffle with Stripe, but ultimately I'm going to end up presenting a lot of this stuff free of charge again. I just finished a new novel, first draft. I've got to go through the next month or so and tear it apart and redraft and edit, tighten things up, expand scenes that require expansion because I know I've got a couple of glaring holes in my, in world logic. Every storyteller worth their weight in salt is going to do editing. Is going to tear themselves apart. You have to, because what you want to give people is the best possible version of the story that you are creating because your audience deserves that. My job, my duty is to offer a story that will entertain and maybe provoke some thought and conversation, possibly. I'm not the most, deep thinker, as it were, okay? Some of my concepts are fairly obvious and they're not grand ideas. I'm not some tremendous philosopher, but there are notions and ideas and messages that I would hope are instantiated at least subtly enough that they're not banging people over the head, but are clear enough that they can be interpreted or inferred throughout the material, throughout the text. And again, I'm going to delve a little bit into being personal and reveal a little bit about myself and my ethics. I say God gave me the duty first, and I've said this before. I'm going to be repetitious, and this is something people who watch me or listen to me have heard me say before. Much as they've heard you say that you're a radical, that you're dangerous. I'm sorry if I had a bingo card for Ryan Roger Athay saying I'm controversial, would probably be the free space. Sorry, I'm just going to throw that out there, brother. Um, just going to poke you a little bit. Got to do it. Um, but my first duty is as a father. That is God's first calling to me. Next is to be as good a husband as I can be. I fall short sometimes in both. I'm only human. I try to do what I can, but I'm just a janitor and a schizo. But that's a whole other thing.
Oh,
Um,
freeze frame this image, folks.
oh, but the third duty God gave me is to tell stories. Nowhere in that duty did he say, "You're going to make money doing this, son." No, that's not expected. Would it be nice? Sure. But if I have to choose between making money off of what I do as an art form and staying true to practicing that art form, well, I have a regular job. My wife and I get by okay.
Mhm.
Guess what? The art will be what it is. It may never have a big audience, and that's okay. Not everyone's going to be a huge character. Not everyone is going to be top of the heap. In order to be top of the heap, you have to have people to stand on. And guess what? I'm gonna eternally probably be one of those guys who gets stood on.
Oh, come on, Byron. God told me, buy that private jet. That means
Yeah,
you can worship me more effectively. And I
yeah,
could wear
no,
my lovely suit and my tie and go to the mega church and be like,
yeah,
God
no
told
Joel
me,
Olsen
give
here.
me money, and if you don't, you're all going to burn. All that sort of stuff. I need my second private plane, damn it.
Say
Get higher than
praise, Ryan Roger
God.
Athay. Say praise, brother. Sorry,
There we go.
that's gonna get clipped. Um, Hallelujah, Ryan Roger Athay. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, in my humble gear, and I touch someone, and then they magically come to life. It's not an animatronic. No, no. But the idea of reform versus replace is a very interesting one. The bubbles beneath the surface, because I'm not the only radical, folks. You look at reality based and how much influence it's had under the surface. It's immense, full of talented creators who want to be the change they want to see by pursuing their own creative endeavors, who want to bring down mainstream media, who want to bring down the entertainment industry, wreck the games industry. We're getting to a point where 33 people can make a game in a few years, sell 3.3 million copies in 33 days, and then call it Expedition 33.
I,
Another example of
I wish I had.
democratizing gaming.
I wish I had a computer strong enough to play that game, or the expendable funds to buy that, or the time. I've got 4 kids in the house and a regular job and projects like the back deck that my father-in-law and I finished the other day. Um, I don't have as much time for video games as I used to. I'm a dad who works a regular job. At the end of the day, I'm not going to have a great deal of impact in anything to do with gaming or pop culture other than what I produce in terms of written form. But I can definitely appreciate your aims. And by and large, I am much in support of that. Quite possibly where I shoot myself in the foot there, though, is I do indulge in writing some fan fiction, um, which is just, it's my own material that utilizes an anchor of intellectual properties that already exist. I don't do this stupid, weird shipping shit, though. No romance in my fan
Hey,
fiction.
hey, George Martin, you want to finish Game of Thrones? Check out Romance of the Three Kingdoms and then use that as a basis, right? None of the sides win. The side comes out of nowhere and somehow kills everyone and wins. That's basically Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a great Chinese story. It's anchored in actual history, so it has a solid basis for the story that it's telling. And yeah, it's great material to shadow from. It's got plenty of characters, plenty of events, plenty of rises and falls, and the fact
And
that no one
and
wins.
there's a quick short
Yeah,
form way for him to study that is just watch some gameplay videos or story sequences from the Dynasty Warriors franchise.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I gotta consult on Elden Ring. God damn it, that's what I gotta do.
I don't want to go down that road because I could spend about an hour and a half screaming about fucking Martin, and I've only probably got about another 20-25 minutes here with you
Yeah,
today before I get going. So I wanted to come to the last preset question that I've got here. Actually, second to last because the other one is kind of a throwaway. We touched on games journos before, but there's one particular creature in that arena that I'd like to delve a little more into. And this is the point where, quite frankly, I fully expect if I'm going to get any problems or pushback or flack from YouTube/Google, it would come from this segment. I don't give a shit. I've had this channel on YouTube since 2007. Guess what? If it happens, it happens. But I think you deserve to have some place to continue to say these things and to put forth your perspective on YouTube as well. And if they don't like it, they can get fucked. I'd like to delve into Alyssa Mercante. You've said before that people like her are threats that cannot be safely ignored, and I am much in agreement with you. She is a cat's paw.
Mhm.
What is it about folks like her and John De La Rose? And yes, I would equivocate them as far as being ideologues that makes them require active resistance rather than apathy. You were speaking yesterday about Cassie over at Cult Classic Cage. Her approach towards Mercante is to take the apathy approach, which I'm sure, if you're familiar with Knights of the Old Republic, the character of Kreia, who quite frankly is the greatest creature created in the Star Wars lore and canon. As far as I'm concerned, she should be canon. God damn it. Um, Drew Carpathian let that character be created and tossed her aside like a cheap fucking trinket. Worst decision that he ever fucking made as far as ignoring a character who should remain strong in the canon. But Star Wars is dead and buried and should be ignored anyway, unless you're going to examine some of the philosophy thereof. Kreia, tremendous character. But apathy is worse than death, according to Kreia, because at least death allows for the carrion and the bugs to feast. Apathy is even worse. And I don't think that apathy applied to a creature like Mercante will be effective, because even if she is ignored to the point where she goes away and has a mental breakdown and does whatever she's going to do to herself, which, hey, bon voyage, um, no great loss to the world, someone or something will fill in the gap. But
Mm,
I'm spurging out and going a little bit too overboard.
fine. It's fine.
Let me come back to the central question. What makes her or someone like her require active resistance?
Oh, it's very simple. It's because ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away, it makes it worse. And I make it quite clear, folks, that the reason we are where we are today in the dire straits and the fact that the culture war has only exacerbated in recent years is because for decades we ignored people like this instead of rooting them out. They do not leave. They have to be pushed. She clipped that for a fucking good reason. Because it got to her. Just like stinking digital prostitute and her natural habitat being on her knees.
For
Okay?
her back.
That too. That too. 2-0 for the abortions. But she is an egregious example because of the fact that she has been so proactive. She's more a program than a person, just like Vader is more machine than man, a victim of ideological poisoning to the point where once she loses the lawsuit, and she will lose it, folks, she will spiral and go batshit crazy. Now, you could make a similar argumentation with John De La Rose. John De La Rose has gone through so many controversies over the past 9, 10 years. It's unbelievable. On almost every occasion, Byron, he has grown as a result of it, which means he thrives in that habitat. He drove a fucking comic creator, Liam Gray, batshit crazy, and he helped drive another comic creator, not on his own, but he led the way on it. He drove another comic creator, Ed Piskor, to take his own fucking life. And he had the temerity to pay tribute to the guy. While his comment section was like, dude, cry me a river. You helped make this possible. But
He
he
was
still
also he
kept
was
on
also
going and
he was
kept
also
on growing.
curiously he was also curiously named by Jacob Starling, who was the COO of Subversive or Superverse Publishing, which was the first publishing house that he published his first books under, the For Steam and Country. John De La Rose was named by that gentleman as the primary motivating factor behind the absolute failure of our publishing house. So it seems like JDA leaves corpses in his wake no matter where he goes.
Of course he does.
Sorry,
Because he
John. I know a little bit about you, fuckwad.
because he fights for himself and only for himself. And that's why he prevails in all of his controversies, which is why I treat him with apathy. Quite simply, because he thrives in the controversy. You cannot treat a creature like Mercante with apathy. Why? Because her lot have control of the institutions. You cannot ignore a
There.
boot crushing your skull. You can
Mhm.
ignore, though, a lone wolf for the most part because he doesn't have institutional power. My colleagues don't see this, though, because they don't want to burn down institutions. They want to make them better.
Well, right, because Mercante has contacts in the publishing realm, especially at
And
Rolling
the
Stone.
industry as well. Yeah.
Rolling Stone connections really kind of irk me because there's a double another kind of Gordian knot in that regard. Hold on one second. Where is it? It's this notebook. Um, okay. James Sunney was one of her primary contacts for the editorial department at Kotaku. James Sunney is also on the board of directors for Jacobson Media. Jacobson Media is owned by the folks who own Rolling Stone. She has connections that are through these secondary entities and personalities who are cat's paws of other subsidiaries owned by higher ups in control at the larger institutions. This is
She also
where
has a she also has a connection to Spear Chucker Studio CEO Abu Bakr Ali Akbar Salim.
Admiral Akbar. Anyway, sorry.
Hmm. Fucking bastard. They're peas in a pod, and for folks, some of my own colleagues to give that fucker the benefit of the doubt when he's nothing more than a blackmail mercante. It's damn right criminal.
Now I know I may seem or I may be coming off as paranoid when I bring up these bits of information that I've been chasing down over the years. Look, a lot of this started way before it showed up in television and video and movies and video games. You take a look at what happened in 2006 when Penguin Putnam and Random House had their merger start off. Before they even got cleared by the Federal Trade Commission to complete that merger, the editing department, and the marketing and advertising department, which was comprised before the merger of approximately 3,800 individuals, they scrapped a large portion of those individuals. They laid off 1,100 people in the advertising, marketing, and editorial departments of Penguin Putnam and Random House. Of those 1,100 people, approximately 920 of them were all men, leaving only 180 of the people who were let go were women. Most of the people who were retained, of those people, approximately 94 was it 94? Sorry, let me check my numbers here.
Fine. Like the stream, share the stream, follow or subscribe to Byron of Sidious, and you can check me out on Rumble exclusively at capital R, capital R, capital A, 1999. That's capital R, capital R, capital A, 1999.
Okay, of the remaining staff at Penguin Random House, 96% are registered Democrats, 2% are members of the Democratic Socialists of America. Look, this problem has been around way longer than people are aware of. As you mentioned before, it goes back to the foundation of entertainment, which is narrative, which is storytelling in its most basic form if you're
First,
going to make it
yeah,
permanent.
the first Hollywood film. Birth of a Nation, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic film. They should make a sequel called Rebirth of a Nation. Okay? See how much the entertainment industry in the US has developed, has progressed, and yes, regressed It's 110 years old, 111 years old. If a person was that old, they'd have 1.5 feet in the grave. The same is true of the industry itself. It's had its time. Bye bye. Let a new generation with new creativity take the fold. We don't need, literally, Byron, we don't need journalists anymore. We don't need politicians. We don't need teachers. And with enough internet training, we won't need doctors and fucking nurses either. Okay?
Let it
How do
enter
I?
the let it enter the next bardo, the next
Yeah.
bardo of rebirth.
Literally,
That-
that'd be a good story, Byron. A society who's educated by YouTube is like, let's watch a how-to video on how to perform heart surgery, and then we'll perform the fucking heart surgery. That's how we get it done, folks. And that's the world we're going to have to enter. Why? Because institutions period cannot be trusted because they are susceptible to decadence and corruption. So you want to write a book, Byron? You type in, how do I write a book? You want to publish a book, Byron? How do I publish a book? You want to sell a book, Byron? How do I sell a book? And
I
that
actually
is
think I,
how society will move forward in the digital age.
I I think I know. I think I have the perfect candidate actually to write that kind of story. A colleague of mine on Substack, a fellow who does indulge more in sci-fi than I do. I'm mostly fantasy and horror, but there's a fellow on Substack named Jolan Hildebrandt. He's quite the talented sci-fi storyteller. If you folks ever head on over to Substack, I would highly recommend giving Jolan a follow and a subscription.
You
He
can
does
make it
promote.
You can make it a fantasy, Byron. You could set it in Wakanda.
No, I can't do that. I know who my father is. Anyway, um, okay.
But the Mercante creature, she will have a bad end, ladies and gentlemen, like all good puppets of the entertainment establishment do. She will be exposed for what she is. Who knows? She might have another abortion. And then another creature just like her will emerge. Why? Because it's far better for creators to make names for themselves addressing symptoms, Byron, than it is addressing the disease itself, which is the entertainment industry. It is the games industry. And for as long as they are allowed to exist as the disease, the symptoms, Mercante being one egregious example, the more symptoms will be made manifest. Simple as that.
Much more than likely true. I am going to have to start the process of wrapping
Sure.
up here so that I can get the little one up from her nap time and get her lunch. And then we've got my wife and I have got a guy coming to do measurements on a couple of windows we're having replaced in the house, hopefully next month. Um, before I before you get going, before we wrap up the tail end of the stream here, I'd like to ask you. You've made kind of a joke a couple times about you're going to write a book about all these people, all these characters that you have been touching base with and interacting with. And I know that you've said it kind of flippantly, but
Mhm.
I have to ask because I'm a bookish sort of fellow. Um, are you actually going to be working on a book about all this?
Oh, I am in the process of writing it down. I had to write a little asterisk on this day at this time I got deplatformed. So now I'm going to have to do it from memory, which is going to be very interesting. But yeah, we're going to go through it, ups and downs. We'll have like a special section on the bigot verse, special section on Speargate, special section on my deplatforming, and all sorts of other things. I mean, my second run from late 2021 to mid 2025. That can be its own book of all the people I've met, all the situations I've gone through, how much I have learned, and we will tell the people the overt and the covert aspects of content creation from my own perspective. And let me tell you this as a nice little hint, Byron. The overt problems most people can handle, the covert ones, they can't. That's why you see so many examples of creators going nuts because they can't handle the covert, behind the scenes stuff, the
Well, I have an
subtle
advantage.
things.
I have a small advantage there in that I was already nuts to begin with.
Well,
You
that's actually been, Byron, one of the biggest burdens lifted. That I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm exiled, which means I cannot tango with my colleagues on YouTube, and they certainly won't tango with me on Rumble because
right,
audience crossover may not be possible for them. It might not.
right, and this brings me down to another kind of sub question branched off of that because you've also hinted at or alluded to having background information on certain folks within the reality based bigot verse kind of arena of characters and personalities, almost a subtle threat that you know things about some of these people that you would reveal or release in the event that they butted heads with you.
Yep.
Um, that by itself, just going to put it out there, that seems like a really unpleasant tactic to use against people who are ostensibly your friends and colleagues.
Mhm. All for the sake of survival, my good man. Because Speargate showcased a lot, despite the fact we all hung together. It did showcase a lot. I knew I was living on borrowed time ever since that situation happened, despite the fact that we all gained from it, which was good. But
Right.
I knew I was living on borrowed time. Another advantage of this deplatforming, I could get eased out without any kind of controversy.
Kind of, yeah. But I think a follow up question to that would be for me, wouldn't it be easier for these folks if they don't want to have that sort of Damocles hanging up there to just come out and say what they believe you know about them that's in the background? Like, all right, cards on the table. I've admitted this before. I've said this before to people. They're well aware of it. I joked before about being a paranoid and a schizophrenic. No, I am a paranoid schizophrenic. Uh, I'm on medication. Okay, folks? I've said this before. When it comes to being a creative writer, a fiction writer, I have an unfair advantage over people like John Delarose. The creature that's on the cover of this book, I see this motherfucker on almost daily. Quoth is a persistent visitor in my day to day life. I have to deal with that smug, smarmy son of a bitch. And it's part of somebody could easily say, okay, we don't have to take this guy seriously about anything he says. We can easily dismiss him and flap a hand because he's admitting he's a lunatic. Yes, I am. But I am willing to admit that God cursed slash gifted me with this little tool because I've turned it around and used it as a mechanism. Hey, if I'm not having any like creative juices of my own flowing, I'll just go off my meds for a couple of days and bammo, I've got a short story in hand. It's helpful.
I can I can answer your question
Sorry.
in regards to why don't these people set the record straight in regards to their interactions with me. There's one thing in common with every controversy I have seen as a content creator, every single one. Whoever makes the first move loses every single time. So if you ignite the controversy, Byron, you will lose that controversy. Remember Speargate, great example. The opposition sparked that controversy through clipping me out of context. Everyone rallied around me. We all hung together. We all not only survived that controversy, but thrived in it. You look at, say, when Endymion, for example, very prominent creator, was disappointed that he wasn't included in the collaboration between Brett Cooper and Kada. He ignited that controversy. He then doubled down on it. Oh, it's a good job the other guy got the publicity. Not saying Cater, the other guy, to try and undermine him. When the fucker has been on SNH and he's watched the damn show with Cater on it. So he doubled down on the controversy and his reputation suffered. Those are just a few examples of controversies where if you make the first move, you will lose. That is why folks don't set the record straight. Folks that have been on reality based in the past, who won't be on in the future, because they've distanced themselves from me and they'll disguise it with, oh, my schedule won't work, or, I'm very busy, that sort of thing. They'll disguise the covert problem with the overt one. And it's something that not many people bring up, because if you bring it up, it will open up Pandora's fucking box, which will cause audiences to become disenfranchised, which is why no one makes the first move. I just speak my mind. Everything I've ever
Right.
said, I stand by it. And yes, there is this covert, nasty underbelly to what we do, which if audiences found out about, they would become disillusioned by. I'm not going to hide that away, especially now that I am exiled and all likelihood I'll never be back in the mainstream again. I have the luxury to say that to you all now without fear of reprisal. What else can be fucking done to me?
Right. It's sort of like, hey, you already shoved me off the cliff. I
I
survived
can't
the
be
fall.
on. I mean, it was made patently clear on the record. Can't be on SNH anymore as long as it's on YouTube. Can't be on Smash's show as long as it's on YouTube. I can't be on Will's show as long as it's on YouTube. I can't be on any Bigotverse show as long as it's on YouTube. So, in a sense, I am exiled, but that gives me the creative freedom to tell folks what it's like. And one thing about creator communities, Byron, is that they fundamentally don't change. People may come and go, but the structure that keeps it all in place is exactly the same. And it's usually centered around one or two people. In the Bigot versus case, Hypno and Smash, and long may that remain. But for the most part, it centers around one person, which is the host. But the structure never changes.
Oh, and that sucks for you. I'm sorry. It just does. Uh, I'm sorry that you've had to be on the receiving end of that. And
Mhm.
sincerity is a difficult thing to convey without seeming like a sap.
Mhm.
But I'm okay being a
I
sap.
take this I take this whole situation very positively because it gave me the opposition put me in a position where I've become a martyr. So no one can even condemn me. No one on our side can condemn me. Yes, he's a bit too radical. He's being deplatformed. Yes, he said a few things across the line, but they cannot outright condemn me because you don't kick a man while he's down. And I'm permanently down now. There's nothing lower than an exiled creator. I have to rebuild on Rumble, and hopefully I will, and make occasional appearances on YouTube among criminally underrated creators that not many people watch, which gives me more creative freedom to speak my mind. As I alluded to you earlier, Byron, the more prominent the show, the less time you get to speak, especially if it's a big panel, and the less you can actually speak your mind. I couldn't even say fucking midget on SNH. That really fucking irked me, man. Okay, that may seem like a small thing, pardon the
Good
pun, midget,
wordplay. Good
but
wordplay. I
that.
love it.
Come on, camera, don't do this to me now. Camera. God damn it, I can't use my hands because a camera will see it and then zoom in and out. But when Hypno said, no, you can't say midget, I'm like, fuck you. Like, legitimately, fuck you. I've been your colleague for a few years now, and I had the luxury to say that. But it's like, damn, man, if it's getting to the point on YouTube where saying midget is problematic, I'm
Midget?
fucking grateful to be exiled. I'm
M-
grateful.
Midget got you yeeted or would get you yeeted?
It's seen as a problematic word. Yeah, midget.
Gotcha.
A,
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 f-
an
a,
algorithmically an algorithmically suppressive word.
a noise that you make with your face will get you that kind of trouble.
Christ, Spear Chucker got me in fucking
I
trouble.
Right, and I can't go too far in that direction, or else I'm going to engage in hypocrisy, and I'd rather not be a hypocrite if I can avoid it. As a fallen creature, as a human being with a sinful nature, I'm going to fall short anyway, but I'm not going to actively charge ahead into that. Anyhow, I am going to get going here in a minute. Mr. Athay, do you have any last words for the very small handful of folks who are seeing this now, and who will see it later when they decide to watch on a later restream or representation?
Well, I say thank you all very much for watching. If you haven't already, like, share, follow, or subscribe, depending on your platform. And I'm grateful to everyone who watches me and all those who are reality based. So I appreciate this conversation, Byron. That's a great advantage of talking to the criminally underrated. You can actually say everything, everything without causing any fallout whatsoever. I'm grateful to be deplatformed. I'm grateful to be in exile. And fingers crossed I can get to 1,000 followers on Rumble as soon as possible to prove
One
that
does hope you can
getting
get there, man.
exiled is great. Go ahead.
That's again that is wonderful that you have shot up the ranks of numbers here on Rumble. Um, I am just really quick going to play something that well kind of puts it all in perspective. Put the fries in the bag. Hey, Lisa, quit being a foolish slag. Yes. Put the fries in the bag, Alyssa, because ultimately that's where it's going to end up. Nobody wants you or needs you here. Go away, just never come near. Hey, Lisa, put the fries in the bag. Hey, Lisa, you're a filthy nasty. Yes, put the fries in the bag, Alyssa. My buddy Bill Melkert, a fellow I went to high school with years and years and years ago. He has a pro account on something called Suno, um, and he's been chit chatting with me the last couple of months, and every now and again, I will write up some lyrics or poetry, and I'll send it off to him, and he'll throw it through his Suno account and put together these songs for me. Um, I initially had him doing it as supporting or supplemental material. I did some punk songs with him in order to create this fake band, Pack of Punks, who are characters who appear in the novel that I just finished writing. It's supplemental material to kind of go hand in hand.
Well, I
Um,
used to know myself for my intros and outros and things. And
I thought so. It's
yeah,
familiar.
yeah, it does have the cadence. But I also, folks, I also, thanks to Vio, made some Mercante edits of her dancing. And every single one, every single picture referenced, made her out to look like a man. For some odd reason. I do
I've
not
got to
know
see.
why. But I
I've got to
know
see
that
that.
I know Byron has to go and, well, live his life with his family while I relax for the rest of the day. I will be on a show later today at 8 p.m. Eastern, which is 1 a.m. UK time. I'll be on Lord Triton's channel to have a good talk with him, another criminally underrated creator. And Byron, you're always welcome to be on reality based. We do shows on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Wednesdays and Fridays are at 9 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. Eastern. Monday show is 8 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. Eastern. But I'm thinking of starting all the shows an hour earlier so I can go to bed earlier because this 25-year-old is starting to feel real old. Real
Hey,
old.
how do you think? How do you think I feel? I'm a full voting age adult, older than you. How do you think I feel? It's all right. I'm used to not getting much in the way of sleep because I've been a dad since I was 22. Um, just yeah, small thing there. I have 6 children. 2 of them are now adults. They live out in Western New York, where I'm from, in the Buffalo area. I've got 4 little ones, well, 3 little ones here, and then the 12-year-old as well. Yeah, I've been a dad for pretty much most of my life, and that's what I do. I'm dad. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for tuning in today. I know that you have a number of options for your free time when you choose to use it, listening to or watching a presentation on Rumble or YouTube. There's a lot of other options available. And for those of you who have come here, I appreciate that you have made that choice and that you've decided to give Mr. Athay a chance to speak his mind, to say what he is thinking, because we all deserve that opportunity when it is presented to us. And everyone deserves to have entertainment available to them that is not going to try to brainwash and program them. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.
Bye for now.